So you are in for a very, very in-depth analysis of our reparation story. And you see, he's stating that it's organized for competitiveness and the achievement of political rights through reparation. I would like you to put your hands together as I ask Brother Jonathan to take the podium for his
presentation. But I can assure you it is going to be. You know, I'd like to begin by thanking the Museum of African Heritage for the opportunity to make this presentation today, and secondly to do something which has become a ritual for me by now, and that is to acknowledge the leadership of Brother Eric Phillips of the Guyana Reparations Committee, who has taken this ship, this reparations ship, through stormy waters and has brought it close to shore. But you know that has been the most difficult part of it, because to moor is take more time than coming in the channel. I'd like to also say this because I was told by some of my colleagues in the early days of this reparations committee to leave the reparations committee because of their objections to Eric Phillips. My position was this. This is not about Eric Phillips. This is about our ancestors. And that is what is more important. I have taken decisions which are against my own grain and which are essential, which I thought were essential for the survival of the Reparations Committee. And notwithstanding my adulation and adoration of Brother Eric Phillips's leadership, I say that without a question of a doubt, he's one of the finest administrators in this country. So put your hands together for that. We have our differences, and Eric knows this. But the symbol of the maturity of the relationship which has developed between myself and Eric is that nobody knows of those differences. Sometimes only myself, and sometimes me and Eric. It's just necessary for us to behave like this if we are to guide this ship to shore. Having put those preliminary comments out of the way, I would like to present to us some thoughts in the theme organized for competitiveness and achievement through political and achievement of political rights through reparations by saying that we were an organized people. We were an organized people, and we were an extremely competitive people, and probably the most competitive people in this country. And if you look at book 4, page 18, in the Guyana reparation story, book 4, page 18, you would notice that in 1839, this is an example of our organized nature and our competitiveness. 83 freed Africans, including 5 women, bought plantation Northbrook for 30,000 guilders. This precipitated communal purchasing in the village movement. The freed Africans saved money from the pittances they were given for overtime work, from the sale of livestock, feathered stock, brown provisions, and overtime. Within 12 years of the first purchase, in 1839, freed Africans asserted their independence in a dramatic way. Of a total population of 82,000 in British Guyana, over 42,000 lived in the plantations that they had bought. So organized were we that we were able to shift approximately 50% of our population from the accustomed dwelling to new dwellings, and dwellings which they had bought. They developed those dwellings between 1838 and 1850 to the tune of 2.5 million US dollars, which when you work it out using the future tables, it amounts to approximately 1.3 trillion Guyana dollars in today's money. That is the level of efficiency. That is the level of organization that our foreparents had achieved between 1838 and 1850. Contrary to that, today, our state is one of disorganization and lack of competitiveness. But it is not within my vein to harp on our challenges, but rather it is my desire to understand why we are the way we are, because when we understand, we can diagnose and make accurate prescriptions for change. Dr. Khalid Abdullah Tariq al-Mansour in 7 African Arabian Wonders of the World said, and that is this book. I work with the books because some of the things I'm going to say today, even by my understanding, sound a little strange to me. So then inside this, right at page 133. He said, the unspoken reason why the West is unwilling to announce an objective perspective regarding the history of Northeast Africa is the intellectual arrogance associated with their long-standing version of the white man's burden. In the course of advancing racist doctrines of white supremacy, European institutions felt obliged to reconstruct world history. And so what? Reconstruct world history. And so what we have had over the years and before the Guyana reparation story, what we have had before this is that reconstructed world history. The Guyana reparation story is set in a context of deconstructing that white supremacist constructed world history of Africans in Guyana, and helps to prepare the African mind to receive ideas which will help to mold us into an organized and competitive community of Africans in Guyana with political rights. Political rights means the right to self-governance as articulated in the 1833 Act of Emancipation, where it was referred to as manumission. The only thing that we were given in the 1833 Act of Emancipation was manumission. And it was the only thing that we did not get. So that to date, we have received nothing for our sojourn here. It was that right that was denied us, which led to our second enslavement. And I want to stress this point. That contrary to belief that in 1800, can you excuse me, let me turn out this one, please, is my phone. We were freed in 1838. If we dispassionately assess the evidence, we will find out that post 1838, we were re-enslaved in this land called Guyana. and that it is our responsibility today to free ourselves from that re-enslavement. And it is that re-enslavement which led to the destruction of our competitiveness and to our disorganization. So that our current disorganized state and our current lack of competitiveness is evidence of our re-enslavement. The African entrepreneurial movement, which led to us buying approximately 200 plantations in Guyana, proves and proved our organization and our competitiveness. As Eric usually put it, Eric says, in no post-slavery society was there a repeat of what our foreparents did here. It called for a high degree of coordination of thoughts, plans, and aspirations, and it called for a lot of forethought, because there is no way in which a people could have raised the equivalent of $1.3 trillion in today's sums in the 12 years between 1838 and 1850. It means that they had to be planning for that day long before that, under conditions which were much more arduous than anything that we have encountered over the past 23 or past 50 or how much ever years. Our competitiveness must be measured by the work that we have done to establish the foundations of the modern infrastructure of Guyana. It has made us the largest investors and the most productive in the history of the Guyanese nation. And I repeat that the largest investors in this Guyanese nation has been us, the Africans. Okay. And I will point out to you why I say so. But it is about this book. See book 4, pages 8 to 9, and book 4, page 12. What do we see on page 8 and pages 8 to 9? Here we see that Africans reclaimed from swamp, sea, and forest 15,000 square miles of Guyanese territory, approximately 18% of our 83,000 square miles. It was done by us. Where we are standing today did not exist before our foreparents took the decision and developed the fortitude of mind that they were going to tackle the wild coast. It was called the wild coast because once you landed here, you died. Even the Amerindians, who claim to be the first peoples of Guyana, did not come around here and mess around with the wild coast. It was our foreparents and their fortitude who decided that, well, look, we can tackle this, we can drive back the sea, we can drain the swamps, and we can take out them trees and make it what it is today. In clearing that 18% of Guyana, they cleared approximately 9 million acres of land. And they had no BK excavators and them kind of story. We did it with shovel and bucket in hand. We built 2.5 million miles of drainage canals, stretches and interbed drains, 3.5 thousand miles of dams, roads and footpaths, and we built 2.176 thousand miles of sea defense and river defense. In the process, moving approximately 1 million tons of earth by unpaid manual labor. 100 million tons of earth by unpaid manual labor. Now this is what I want us to bear in mind. Note that in today's accounting world, and it was always that way, unpaid labor is correctly recorded as accrued wages. It is a liability. It is an investment. It is a loan. Our foreparents loaned to the nation Guyana the wages to be accrued to moving 100 million tons of earth with bare hand, the building of 2.176 thousand miles of sea defense, 3.5 thousand miles of dams, roads, and footpaths, 2.58 million miles of drainage, the equivalent of clearing 9 million acres of land, and reclaiming from sea, swamp, and forest 15,000 square miles of Guyana territory. That is the wages owed to us. And you know, when you take a loan from the bank, you just got to pay interest. So you got to add interest to whatever sum we come up with for the 100 and something years, no, for the 270 plus the 100 and something years that we did not receive it, and we're not taking it at 13%, which is the bank rate of interest, because our foreparents could not get monies from the banks, and so they had to borrow on the so-called black market at between 40 and 50%. So when you calculate that, you're going to get an understanding of just how much money is owed to our foreparents, for which we are the stewards. The Guyana reparation story provides a perfect rebuttal to Finance Minister Jordan's inappropriate accusation of public servants as inept and lethargic. I think it was a disgraceful statement to be made by an African towards the largest body of public servants, who incidentally are primarily Africans. You cannot speak to the children of those who did the work that we spoke of before and who have been denied the recognition of that work. You cannot speak to them in such a fashion. And I think that we have to organize ourselves to let Minister Jordan know that what he said is against the grain of history and goes against our sensitivities, and that it should not be done again. Book 2, Africa Before Chattel Slavery, supports the productivity presumption as it points to us as the mothers and fathers of modern man, Homo sapiens sapien. How more productive can you be? How more productive can you be than to be the mothers and fathers of all the peoples of the planet Earth? It also points to Kemet as the cradle of modern civilization. It points to us as being the inventors of mathematics. It points to Imhotep as the inventor of medicine. And at page 7, it mentions that Timbuktu is one of the earliest centers of world learning, with over 700,000 books still surviving. It points to the Moors, the mining of minerals, transoceanic travel and navigation, law and religion, astronomy and philosophy, all being inventions of the Africans in Africa. And so that is what you will find in this little book, and this is why Sister Pender has pointed out that it is a perfect gift. It is a must-have. The Guyana reparation story, its value lies as a point of reference for establishing a basis for the refutation of the mythical, slanderous, and inaccurate narrative given as Guyana's history, and establishes a true account of the reasons for Africa's and Africans' lack of competitiveness, and comes from a body of research which reveals, for instance, in Book 3, page 1, the negation of the African essence, Article 13 of the declaration which was made by the Durban Conference, which said that the transatlantic slavery was a negation of our very essence, meaning that our very spirits were tampered with. In fact, that is the reason. If you look in slavery, you would notice that there was a propensity to, whenever they punished us, to dismember us. And whenever they killed us, it was to dismember us, cut off our arms, cut off our heads, cut off our legs. It is because they believed that once they did that, our souls were damaged. So that it is not only that they had intended to work us for their profit, they had intended to damage our very essence, our very beings, the invisible parts of our beings. Book 3 also speaks of the continental African Holocaust, which showed that the population of the African continent doubled between 1650 and 1950, only doubled, whereas that of Europe increased by over 530% within the same period of time, which points to the Holocaust on the African continent. It points to the European nations as the architects not only of continental Africa's Holocaust, but also of the Guyanese African Holocaust, in which we saw the death of approximately 450,000 Africans here in Guyana in the effort to build our society. And the Holocaust did not only stop there. On the 2nd of April 1810, a proclamation was made by the governor banning Africans from being Africans. And that if you were caught engaging in African culture, you were either jailed or killed, as the courts would determine. And the genocide did not stop there. The genocide expressed itself in the annihilation of the free African communities in Guyana, which was established by our people who chose to run away from the plantations and set up communities in the hinterland. They called them the Maroons. Today, we cannot point to one single Maroon community in Guyana like we can point to Maroon communities in Jamaica, in Suriname, and maybe other places. We have to ask ourselves, why was Maroon communities allowed to exist elsewhere, but not here in Guyana? It points to the church as the trigger for our disorganization, disorientation, and loss of competitiveness. For it was the church that sanctioned the enslavement of Africans. It points to the source of many traumas which we have suffered in building this country, the many forms of punishment that they would put us through, the thumb screw, the lashes with the bullwhip, breaking on the rack. And then there was this horrible thing that they used to affix, a collar that they used to affix to your neck with some very long spikes, which made it impossible for you to lie down. So if that thing was on you for a month, you could not lie down for a month. It meant that you could not sleep in an inclined position for a month. And then it speaks of the branding of Africans. All Africans who came here were branded with a brand which showed that they belonged to a European man, chattel. Our organization and competitiveness is the very essence of necessity for us. I stop and I make this point. Notwithstanding our scattered and diverse and disorganized nature, we have got a purpose in our minds. I have purposed in my mind 3 years ago, that the Reparations Committee will survive. Because it is a point of organization. It is a point of establishing our competitiveness. And I project that thought to you this evening and ask for you to join myself and to join Eric. And I know that many of us believe this also too. That's why we come religiously every Thursday. But help us to project this to the African nation in Guyana, that this competitiveness and our organization is of the essence of the necessity for our survival. Quite unlike our brothers and sisters in many Caribbean nations, we face the threat of a well-coordinated and probably unrecognized force. A force which numbers 1.2 billion people on the Asian continent in a country called India. Let us not believe that our challenges with the political system in Guyana is due to the Indians in Guyana only. I will present evidence to you this evening to show you that that is not so. That this challenge is most likely being coordinated from India itself and has roots in Indian philosophy, India value system, etc., whatever you want to call it. And I want to share with you some things. This is a document from the African Union. This is a document from the African Union. The African Union sent a one-woman delegation to Guyana in 2011. Her name was Sister Alison Moses, and she came here to investigate the African condition. To date, we have heard nothing from the African Union. 2011 to 2016. I would not have presented this unless I had personally asked Sister Moses what of the report. She said she submitted it to the African Union, but she has heard nothing back from it. One. These are 3 documents. One is entitled UN Activities International Decade for People of African Descent. And number 1 says Guyana has been chosen as one of the 3 countries to be visited by the United Nations Human Rights Commission to send a mission to document the plight of Africans during the International Decade for the People of African Descent. So we got the African Union, which has not responded, and I can ask Brother Eric to fill us up a little bit more on this particular issue, because he has more of the information than me, as to why the United Nations Human Rights Commission, which was sent to Guyana, did not get to Guyana.
Do you want me to comment now or after?
After. I'm going to show you why I'm saying that we have to organize. It is imperative that we organize. This is another document from Sister Vereen Shepherd, dated November 9th, 2015. Sister Vereen Shepherd was a member of the UN Working Group of Experts on the People of African Descent, UN. And she said on November 9th, she sent this message to Eric. To date, no reply has been forthcoming from the government of Guyana, and so the country visit may have to be postponed. Is there a reason for the non-response? Do you know? So here's a woman who got more interest in Guyana than the Guyanese government, it seems. The final document I want to share with you is one dated October 22nd, 2015, headed Ms. Audrey Jardine Waddell, Director General, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to Cuba Lodge, 254 South Road and Shift Chandapal Drive, Georgetown. Dear Ms. Jardine Waddell, the Department of Government thanks you for sharing the information related to the first regional meeting of the International Decade for People of African Descent in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Please be guided that the department will be unable to attend this meeting from December 3 to 4, 2015, and wishes to suggest that the Ministry of Social Cohesion be invited to select appropriate representatives for this important meeting, they call it. We missed out on this also too. So that if we take this as an indicator of the trend of representation for African people, it's a dismal case. We got a Minister of Finance who is referring to us as inept and lethargic. We got a Foreign Affairs Ministry which is not concerned about getting our story into the international arena. We got the African Union, which is just the same. We have the United Nations sending a delegation which does not get here because we have not responded. So I think we're going good. Now let us compare this with some documents which show the Indian relationship with Indians in Guyana. Titled Mother India, Children Abroad. Read this piece here, sir, because you're seeing good. Focus on who? You get the point that I'm making? Mother India, this is not produced in Guyana, this is produced in India. Mother India, children abroad, focus on Guyana. Then we got this one that I got from Eric this week. This one is entitled Conference. They're advertising a conference. And it speaks to people of Indian origin. This conference is targeted to people of Indian origin and not of Indian descent. So we can't take this International Decade for People of African Descent crap. And they focus on technology, investment, business, and networking opportunities. And it is organized by the Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, GOPIO Business Council, and GOPIO New York. The co-sponsors are the Asian Indian Commerce of Chamber of Commerce, New Jersey, Indian Merchants Chamber of Commerce, Mumbai, India, Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FIL Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Philippines, Indo-Netherlands Chamber of Commerce, the Netherlands, Indo-German Business Association, Germany, Indo-Vietnamese Chamber of Commerce, Vietnam, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, Northern California, Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, BC, Canada. Supporting organization, Association of Indians in America, Indian American Forum for Political Education, National Federation of Indian American Associates, Network of Indian Professionals, Professional Indian Network Association. You hear on how many fronts the people are organized? These are our competitors. 1.25 billion people in India and around the world organized, and these are the people we're competing with. Where is my presentation? And so I come now to the second enslavement. So you better believe it, we enslaved. Now all of this is relevant to our second enslavement, of which the objectives were very clearly spelled out in the Reverend John Sterling's report in 1835. And I read this to you, I'll read it to you to get you to understand why I'm saying that we are enslaved. The Reverend John Sterling report 1835, which is entitled The Challenge for Negro Education. The stability of colonial society in the West Indies will be at stake once full freedom is attained. So you see how the people were thinking in 1835? We cannot allow these people to attain full freedom. Since 1835, and listen to their words. There are now more or less directly under the imperial government in the different colonies about 770,000 persons who have been released from slavery by the Emancipation Act and are now in a state of rapid transition to entire freedom. The peace and prosperity of the empire at large may not be remotely influenced by their moral condition. It is plain, therefore, that something must be done, and it must be done immediately, they said, in 1835. The law, having already determined and enforced their civic rights, the task, oh no. It is plain, therefore, that something must be done, and it must be done immediately. This is it. Their performance of the functions of a laboring class in a civilized society will depend entirely on the power over their minds. In 1835, they said that they have to mentally enslave us immediately, and this is the second enslavement. For they said, the law having already determined and enforced their civic rights, the task of bettering their condition can further be advanced only by education. So the vehicle for our second enslavement has been the education that we have been given. And this was determined in 1835 after the 1833 Act of Emancipation was passed. And from 1834, they noticed that we were moving rapidly towards our full freedom. So he said, we've got to put something in place, we've got to enslave them. We have to organize to break this yoke of our second enslavement. Our taxes were used to create a state of political and economic vulnerability in our communities, in a legitimate society via indentureship. You see, they had to leave the chattel enslavement society, and then they had to set up a new kind of society which would accommodate this new enslavement. And in order to give the society that legitimacy, but also hold us in enslavement without our consistent rebellion, because we rebelled against chattel slavery, but a game had to be played in our minds where we felt that we were free, so that we would not rebel against the values of the society. What they did is that they brought in amongst us, and in so doing, they used our taxes, which we paid, to finance partly indentureship, which is spoken of in this book, The Guyana Reparation Story, book 4, page 11, and page 13, and which is spoken of by none other than Ravi Dev, who said in the Kaichor News of May 28, 2007, after the cessation of Indian indentureship in 1917, they, the planters, proposed a system of indentureship that would involve settling large number of Indian immigrants as independent farmers after they had served a 3-year contract. Mr. Loku and Dr. Hewley Wharton were authorized on behalf of the BGEIA to convince the Indian authorities of the feasibility of the scheme. They reached India in 1990-20, but opposed by Gandhi and others, they failed. In 1923-24, J.A. Loku and Noonan visited India once again to get the scheme approved, and this time they were successful. I'm quoting this to point out to you the involvement of the Indian government in the affairs of Guyana. In this book, Eric, you've got to help me here with this one. Oh. This statement is taken from the National Archives. And this is part of the message that was sent to India. They said, as our population is now about 45% Indian, and our constitution involves equality of all races, we are really offering India a colony of its own on the northeastern coast of South America with fertile soil and a healthier climate than that of India or of any large tropical colony. This is the competition that we face. 1.45 billion people. It is not about the PPP. We have got an example of officialdom not working for us, but officialdom working for the Indians, yes, our major competitors. How much more, and a motherland involvement, how much more we, as a tiny kernel, have to be organized and have to be competitive and have to see each other as brothers and be able to watch one another in the face and say you're flapping up in the interest of all. The Negro Progress Convention described the scheme as a distinct act of discrimination, claiming that blacks were to be given first consideration as pioneer settlers in British Guyana. They argued that the scheme would tend to rob blacks of their political potentialities. And this is why we got this anxiety today, that, oh shucks, if we don't get this thing right, Jack, you're going back inside there, and it's we dead nail. Rather than having us have the confidence that, well, look, you know, if we don't get it right now, we can get it right next year. And if we don't get it right next year, we can get it right next year. Because we got the evidence that we could get it right. The village movement, which gave us the first constitution in this country. Even before the 1980 Constitution, Victoria's was the first constitution. But more challenging was a powerful myth brought by the Indians. And what I want to show us here is the absolute need for us to come together as a people. More challenging was a powerful myth brought by the Indians. This one is race and stereotypes. It's called Race and Stereotypes. Black Man and Coolie Man, The Roots of Prejudice. Starbuck News, Sunday, October 20, 1991. When the Indians saw the Africans with their dark skin, this is when they landed here in 1838. When they saw us with our dark skin, our kinky hair, mine is gone, large size and other Negro features, they labeled them Rakshas or Lankas, demon followers of the evil king Rawan of the Ramayana. The Indian category of caste was now extended to include the African, who was placed in the position of outcast. Much of this prejudice exists to the present. This is Ravi Dev speaking. Ravi Dev saying that in the Indians' eyes in this country, you black people is outcast. Many of them came from the outcast caste. So that when they landed here, they said, yo, this is an opportunity for us to get rid of our status and let me fit another people inside there. We gonna fit another people inside there. In this context of the association with India involvement, and now they develop a caste system down here, so this is the reason why, and the evidence of the fact that this caste system is operating was the Attorney General, the last Attorney General, Anil Nandalan stated that he's a Chatri.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. It is operational, but we are not aware of it. And we are not aware of the fact that we are in this outcast, which makes it all the more important for us to bind ourselves together, to get organized, so that we can be competitive with these people. We have done it before, we must do it again. What do we have? What do we have? We have book 4 of the Reparation story. You see this little book here, sir? And I give credit to Eric for his foresight, insight, and his brilliance. It seems as though I give you a whole lot of things. You can't find plenty of them. But keep these stories here. Yeah. And you heard the breadth and the depth of what is included in this little book here, sir. So we got this book. And in it we got the claim so that we can organize and re-establish our competitiveness to the levels spoken of, and I can come to that just now. We got the International Decade for People of African Ancestry, and we got the example of the entrepreneurial movement. These are all things that we have before us, that we can rely on, that we can reflect on, and we can feed our minds on it and say, listen, we did do these things before, and we can do it again. But I want to share this with you, because we go to new levels here now. Chisu, and the Taoist Ways of Healing. This is the little book which is written by a Chinese banner. The Chinese Art of Pa Xin Xin, an introduction to the complete system of ancient Chinese Taoist arts. The 8 strands of brocade on page 12 said this: the beginnings in the beginnings, the sons of reflected light and the early Taoists. He asked, how did the Chinese healing arts begin? And then he said, this is how my illustrious master, Professor Chan Kam Lee, and I want you to notice his middle name, Kam. Don't Kam sound interesting to you? Kamet? He told me in 1934 that some 12,000 years ago, approximately 10,000 BC, there arrived in China a race of people who were very tall indeed, reputedly over 7 feet in height. The only people that you got over 7 feet in height in this world is the Maasais, regularly. And because of their unusual clothing, they came to be known as the sons of reflected light, Fan Kung Zu. Where they came from is still a mystery, and perhaps the true answer to this question may never be known. Now, this is